Hello everybody, my name is Tex and welcome back to a bit of an off-the-cuff video. I want to just kind of make a quick thing to talk about some of the new exotics that are coming, as well as some of the new weapons that have been added this season, of which there's a lot. So I'm going to actually jump right into it here. What I'm actually using right now is a website called light.gg. It is updated with the API every single time that a new season comes out, and this is how I always look at the potential roles for weapons. And looking at the exotics tab for the season, we've got obviously our new stasis sidearm here, which is actually a kinetic weapon. It does stasis damage, and it's essentially got two perks. One where you have to get final blows with the weapon to enable a charge shot, and the charge shot you can't hold forever. It's not like Ace of Spades. And once you shoot it, it will freeze a target instantly. It does proc things like Whisper of Hedrons, Stasis Fragments, all that jazz. But the timer is actually pretty short. In PvP, it's a short freeze, which means it's the same as Cold Snaps. And in PvE, it's a long freeze, which means it's the same as any other freeze in PvE. We'll have to see how this thing actually performs. It might or might not run rampant. We'll have to see. Not completely sure yet. But it definitely is interesting as the first stasis weapon that isn't a heavy weapon. Next up is the one and only Vex Mythoclast. We've got a image of it in game here. Servers are still not back up as of recording this, so I'm doing this through the website exclusively. But Mythoclast looks like it's going to be back in its full glory. So it's got maxed out aim assist, some pretty good recoil direction, pretty underwhelming range stability and handling, but that is kind of to be expected. That's how Mythoclast always has been. But actually we have a little bit of an updated version here with us. So obviously we have Timeless Mythoclast, which means this weapon shoots single fusion rifle bolts instead of charging. That if you've ever played D1, it's exactly what it did in D1. But we actually have a little bit of a different scenario here. So we've got Temporal Unlimiter, which means defeating targets, you get the stacks of overcharge. And when you have stacks of overcharge, you can actually swap firing modes. My guess is this is going to be something very, very similar to Symmetry, the exotic scout rifle, where you can then use those charges to hold the trigger and fire up a linear fusion rifle bolt. Now, if this thing does heavy weapon damage with those overcharge shots, Vex Mythoclast may very well be one of the best primary weapons to use in the game. Linear fusions just got buffed, and so if this does heavy weapon linear fusion damage, then it has the potential to be quite busted, especially with its catalyst that we don't know how you get the catalyst yet. We don't even know if Mythoclast is a quest or if it's just a random drop. When you get the catalyst, higher stacks of overcharge increase the stability of the weapon, which, if we go back here, was kind of piss poor at a value of 19. So it might help a lot there. Next up is our class exotic boots for the season. And out of all of these, I think the ones you're going to have to keep your eye on are the Titan one and the Hunter one. So going over the Titan one here, we have Firewalker, which basically means solar final blows give you weapon damage. And while you have that buff from solar final blows, you're harder to slow or freeze, and when you break out, you don't take damage. And you create a blast of solar energy. We'll have to see how potent these are in PvP. Right now, Titans aren't really running movement-based exotics. Dune Marchers are still good, but they're not necessary with the Crystoclasm Titan aspect. And so this might actually be something very, very good for PvP. In terms of PvE, we'll have to see. It's going to be hard to knock down Curious of the Falling Star down a peg. Thundercrash is just so good in PvE right now, so pretty much any other Titan exotic is going to be irrelevant if it can't have a more potent effect than that. Next up is our Hunter's Star Eater Scales, which has Feast of Light. You gain additional super energy from orbs of power you pick up. While your super energy is full, picking up an orb of power overcharges your super, causing you to gain a burst of healing when cast and a bonus to your super damage. And maximum overcharge, you also gain an overshield. So, first of all, the design on these things are interesting, definitely crazy looking. Kind of got like these scales, for lack of a better term, on there. Definitely looking interesting. But the biggest thing with these is going to be how potent they are. So if these boots can do something like make Bottom Tree Golden Gun, the 3 shots do more than a Celestial shot, then we're kind of looking at something interesting here. Because then we actually have a way to buff all of our supers in the game. The thing about Hunter supers is that they're not really used for damage most of the time. Bottom Tree Tether can do some pretty good sustained DPS if you can, especially with Orpheus Rigs. Obviously, Bottom Tree Golden Gun with Celestial Nighthawk is insane burst damage. But then outside of that, Arc Strider is underwhelming even with Raiden Flux. Tether is used for debuffing, and Golden Gun, obviously, you're going to be using Nighthawk unless this thing can somehow make Bottom Tree better than Nighthawk. Then I don't see these things getting very much use. The additional super energy might be very nice. It all depends on how much you get. Last up is our Boots of the Assembler for Warlock, which is basically standing in a rift, creates Noble Seekers that seek out allies not in a rift and heals them. And then standing in Empowering Rift does the same thing, but with damage bonus. And these things could or could not be very good. It all depends on the potency of the effect. So if these Noble Seekers can heal a significant amount to allies outside of the rift, it might be a good gimmick thing, but I don't really see it overcoming something like just running Phoenix Protocol and Weld in a GM, for example. But if the damage bonus might actually have a place in PvP, especially in Trials. So it depends on how long the duration of that buff that you get for damage is. If it's something like Illumina, where you get 10 seconds of getting hit once, these things have the potential to be insane. This is because you can throw down a rift, buff your entire team with damage boost, and then you guys can be mobile while still having those free 2 taps with a 120 or 2 taps with a Dead Man's Tail, which are incredibly valuable in Trials right now. And if you can do that on will without having to coop up and keep yourself in one spot standing in an Empowering Rift, if you can be mobile while having those 2 taps, these boots might have a place in Trials, something like Titan's Ramparts. That said, moving into legendaries, there's a few things that I want to bring up here. First up is a quote-unquote new perk. It is Ace of Spades Firefly has been added to a handful of weapons that are being added this season. In case you didn't know, Firefly is basically Dragonfly plus Dragonfly spec plus Outlaw all in one perk. And so what that does is it adds quite a few options to quite a few different weapons here. The 3 I want to talk about are Fatebringer, the Hung Jury, and Vision of Confluence. So starting off with Fatebringer, everyone's favorite Destiny 1 Vault of Glass weapon. It obviously runs with Firefly here. And we'll have to see how good this is, because honestly, the left half of the perks are underwhelming. Rewind Rounds is a new perk, which is very interesting, where it reloads the magazine when you hit 0 bullets based on how many hits you got. We don't know if it's diminishing returns or if it's a 1-for-1 thing, but depending on how much it gives you, this could be a very, very potent perk. But you already get a reload bonus from Firefly, so something like Thresh might actually be more valuable. And Thresh does proc off of things like Dragonfly. So if you have Firefly and you proc, hit a headshot on a group of ads, and then you hit them all with the Firefly and they die, Thresh is going to proc off of all of those kills, which could lead to some pretty good super generation if you use this thing right. The next weapon I want to talk about is Hung Jury, which is, unfortunately, a 180 RPM scout rifle. But for the purposes of PvE, I've always been of the opinion that archetype of the weapon doesn't matter as much as the perks that it has access to. And Hung Jury can get Firefly Subsistence. And like we just talked about with Fatebringer, Subsistence is like Thresh, where it is going to proc off of those Firefly kills. Which means that if you can get a headshot with Firefly, kill a big group of ads, you have the potential to refill your entire magazine instantly. And Subsistence was actually just buffed, so it doesn't actually give you the reduced reserves anymore, it just refills parts of your magazine with every kill. So Hung Jury has the potential to be pretty good with ad clear, but something that I think is going to be even better is Vision of Confluence. And the reason for this is it is not only is it also a 180, which is unfortunate, but it is an energy weapon instead of kinetic. And energy weapons are way more valuable in the meta right now because of their potential to break shields, especially in something like Grandmaster Nightfalls. Kinetic weapons aren't as useful for that because if you're using a kinetic primary, odds are that you're going to be using a energy special weapon, which means you're burning your special ammo to break shields. Versus if you use a kinetic special weapon for bursting down things like champions or high value targets, then you can use an energy weapon to break shields, which is way more valuable in my opinion. So it already has a leg up there. Not only that, but Vision of Confluence actually has some perk combinations that might be some of the best in the game. So looking at it here, Vision of Confluence is the first weapon that we've ever gotten that can roll both Wellspring and Thresh on the same weapon, which means that every weapon kill with Vision of Confluence is not only going to give you ability energy, but it's going to give you a chunk of your super too. But I don't think this is as good as Wellspring Firefly. Grenade builds are actually some of the strongest in the game, and if this was Demolitionist, this weapon would be hands down the only thing I would be using in PvE. But as we were talking about earlier, just like with Subsistence, just like with Thresh, Wellspring is going to proc off of those Firefly kills, meaning that you can get one headshot, get half of your grenade back if it's like your only uncharged ability. This combination is going to be very, very good for keeping a high amount of uptime on your abilities, and most importantly, with all of these weapons, Firefly is solar splash damage, which means that it can spawn Warmind cells. One of the biggest drawbacks of using anything but an Ikelos SMG is that you have to sacrifice Warmind cells. Next, I want to talk about a handful of weapons that have the potential to be very good in PvP. That is the Wristwalker, the Found Verdict, and the Shayura's Wrath. So, Wristwalker is the new Iron Banner shotgun. In case you didn't know, we are finally getting some new Iron Banner weapons. The design is actually quite clean on this thing. It looks very similar to Parcel of Stardust. But the reason why this thing is so interesting is that it can roll Iron Reach. It is a shotgun that can get the benefits of Iron Reach without having any of the drawbacks of the minus stability, because you don't really care about stability on a shotgun. It is a lightweight, so it actually does have quite a high handling stat to begin with, so you might not actually even need Quick Draw. You could run Iron Reach with something like Slideways on this guy to partially reload your magazine, throw in accurized rounds, rifled barrel. It's pretty free. You're going to have a very high range stat on this shotgun. We'll have to see if it competes. We'll have to see how well it does, but this thing has the potential to be very good. While we're still on the topic of shotguns, I want to bring up Found Verdict. Found Verdict in Destiny 2 is going to be an aggressive frame, which means that it's same archetype as Fellwinter's and Astral, and we're finally getting another option other than Fellwinter's to use in that secondary slot. And it has some interesting roles here. Just like all the other Baltic Glass weapons, it does have rewind rounds, but something that's interesting here is you can get opening shot slide shot on this guy, or if you want opening shot surplus. The reason why this is interesting to me is that it is a 45 base handling aggressive shotgun, which is quite high for an aggressive shotgun, definitely higher than most other options. Range stat of 38 is not bad either. You can throw accurized rounds and either full choke or rifled barrel on this guy. You're going to have a pretty high range stat on this Found Verdict, and honestly, it might actually be better than Fellwinter's, depending on personal preference. The last thing I want to talk about for PvP is the Shayura's Wrath, which is the new Trials SMG. We didn't actually know we were getting a new Trials weapon this season, so it was a pleasant surprise. This thing is a energy 600 RPM SMG, which is actually not as good as the 750s in my opinion, but since it is in the same archetype as Antiope, people that like that weapon back in Forsaken might find themselves in a good spot with this one. And that is especially with its possible rolls. So you can get accurized rounds, full bore, dynamic sway reduction and kill clip on this guy, which is quite the wombo combo, if you ask me. It's going to be definitely a PvP weapon. Some of our other new perks are also on this guy, like Tunnel Vision and Heating Up. But neither of those are really as good as Dynamic Sway, in my opinion. Moving back to PvE, I have some special and heavy weapons here that have caught my eye. The first being Praetor's Revenge. 140 RPM sniper rifle, which is the best for burst damage in the game right now in the sniper family. And it has an interesting possible combination here with rewind rounds and either frenzy or high impact reserves. The reason I say this is if rewind rounds is a 1-to-1, aka if you hit 3 shots, you get 3 shots back, you have the potential to have a very, very high DPS sniper with high impact reserves, because you can shoot off the first half of your magazine and then boom, just spam these high impact rounds at the bottom of your mag with rewind rounds over and over, and you always have that perk. If this isn't how it works, rewind rounds might end up just being a good perk to have, to be able to have a few extra bullets per magazine. We'll have to see. This is a wait and see type roll. It is also kinetic, which is very, very good because it means you can pair it real nicely with something like Vision of Confluence that I was just talking about. And the last thing I want to talk about, the thing that actually has me the most excited from all the VOG weapons, is the Heathen Vengeance. So this is a rocket launcher, a aggressive frame, 25 RPM rocket launcher, which is the best archetype in my opinion, because it has the highest fire rate without having any of the drawbacks, because it has the same magazine as all other rockets without having any of the drawbacks of a low RPM. And the reason why this is important is that this rocket launcher can roll overflow, which means if you pick up some ammo, which is going to happen very, very frequently, you can get either 2, maybe even 3, depends on how it actually works in game, rockets in your magazine, which means you can just have some insane burst damage. Right now, Royal Entry is the best burst damage in the game because it can roll Clown Cartridge and you can get those 2 shots in a row. But if you have Clown Cartridge on your Royal Entry, it means that you don't have any damage perks on your Royal Entry, which does hurt. And so if you take this guy, throw on Overflow, throw on Vorpal Weapon or Lasting Impression, have 2 rockets, get some real nice burst damage, this thing has the potential to be very, very good as a rocket launcher. Keep your eye out for this. The very last thing I want to talk about are the new mods this season. First off, we actually have the return of more Elemental Well mods. Elemental Wells were kind of underwhelming in Season of Chosen, but some of these look like they might actually be pretty decent, like explosive damage spawning a solar elemental well, and then pair that with Well of Life, where you can get increased health regeneration. So splash damage can heal you, essentially. Could be good. We don't know. We'll have to see. We have all of our Vault of Glass weapons here, but what I want to really focus on is our artifact mods. So first of all, Ashes to Assets is 1 energy this season. Incredible. Ashes to Assets is by far the best super generating mod in the game. If you run it with some grenade builds, you can have 30-second supers in PvE if you know where to throw your grenades. We also get Blast Radius and Argent Ordnance for 1 energy this season. Blast Radius is one of the better Charged with Light mods, and Argent Ordnance is not as good because it doesn't stack with other damage buffs, but if you're something like a solo player, it can be pretty nice. The biggest thing I want to talk about here is Warmind's Decree, which Bungie has added Warmind Cell mods back into our Season Pass, which is certainly, they haven't done that since Worthy, and it's definitely something that might break the game a little bit, because Void Splash damage has a chance to create Warmind cells. I don't think I need to really state how powerful that is, especially when some of the best classes in the game right now are Void subclasses. You've got your Bottom Tree Hunter, you've got your Bottom Tree Nova, you've got your Middle Tree Sentinel. All of them make use of a lot of Void Splash damage, which means you're going to be making a lot of Warmind cells. Especially if you have something on Warlock, like a Controverse Holds build, this perk might be invaluable for a Warmind cell build. There's also Hammer the Warmind, which lets you stagger and disrupt Any champions that get hit by your Warmind cells, it's a little situational, but it might be interesting in some scenarios. But I don't foresee it being very reliable, because especially in Grandmasters, Warmind cells can be hard to make, because a lot of the Warmind cell weapons right now aren't that great in general. If you have a kinetic, it's your options are pretty much like Ikelos SMG or 7th Seraph Sidearm, which are pretty mediocre in higher end content because you can't close that gap. And that's why I think this is going to be a little situational. The next thing I want to talk about is our energy accelerant. So I was talking about Firefly earlier. Firefly being kind of insane, hopefully could be really good, and this is a class item mod that lets your Firefly do more damage, which means you're just going to more reliably kill those big groups of enemies with a headshot, which means you can more reliably make those Warmind cells. This is probably, Breach and Clear is probably the most important mod in this entire season. When using a grenade launcher, damaging a boss or champion, or breaking a combatant's shield, reloads your stowed weapons and causes the combatant to take increased damage for a short duration. It requires 9 energy on your class item, which is quite a lot, but the utility this thing provides is going to be probably single-handedly the best mod for GMs this season. If it applies with something like Anarchy or Witherhoard, where every tick is going to re-proc that damage debuff, refill your magazines, that is effectively auto reload if you swap back and forth between 2 weapons. Keep your eye on Breach and Clear. I think it's going to be the best mod this season. Anti-barrier scout rifle is back, meaning you have no reason not to run something like Hung Jury or Vision of Confluence. And then last thing I wanted to talk about was Impulse Recycler, where grenade final blows grant grenade energy. To me, this seems like it's going to be a situation like Controverse Holds, except with kills instead of hits. Stacking those two might just make you never have to shoot your weapon ever again, especially if you throw Warmind cells on top of it. So keep your eye on this one as well. Anyhow, that's sorry for the long, kind of off the cuff, not very well produced video. Was waiting in queue for a long time and figured I'd go over all the stuff on Light GG. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know if any of it was useful. I can do more videos like this in the future if that's something you guys want. Have a good one.